Ethan Cole lived in the small town of Maple Ridge where the air smelled of pine trees and fresh coffee every morning. He owned a small bookstore called Page Turners that sat quietly between the bakery and the flower shop on Main Street. Life for him was simple, but always busy because he was a single dad. His 7-year-old daughter Lily was the center of his world. She had hazel eyes that sparkled with curiosity and a laugh that made every day lighter. Ethan did his best to make her childhood happy, even though sometimes he still felt the ache of losing his wife 3 years ago. Every morning started the same way. He would burn the toast, Lily would laugh, and their dog Marley would steal the last piece of bacon from Ethan's plate. Then they would rush to school before heading to the bookstore. The people in town liked Ethan because he was friendly and helpful, but they also noticed that sometimes his smile was tired. Still, he never complained. One rainy Thursday, the gray clouds hung low over the rooftops. Ethan stood inside his bookstore surrounded by piles of new boxes that had arrived earlier that week. He wiped his hands on his jeans, trying to sort through the deliveries. The wind outside pushed against the windows, making the door shake slightly each time it opened. The bell above the door jingled, and in walked a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen before in Maple Ridge. She wore a dark coat that looked far too fancy for the small-town streets. Her shoes clicked softly on the wooden floor as she looked around with sharp, curious eyes. Her name, as he learned shortly after, was Ava Grant. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and a polite smile that seemed more suited to a business meeting than a bookstore. Ethan noticed the confidence in her voice. He guessed right away that she was someone important. Ava explained that she was the new CEO of a publishing company in the city and was looking to talk with local store owners about promoting a new line of books from small-town authors. Ethan blinked, surprised that someone of her rank cared enough to come all this way from the city. He nodded, offered her coffee, and prepared to listen, though inside he hoped his shirt was not showing a coffee stain. As the conversation went on, Ethan found himself relaxing. Ava was intelligent and serious, but she also had a dry sense of humor that slipped out when she spoke about the stress of her job. At one point, when the lights flickered because of the storm outside, Ethan tried to lighten the mood and said with a smile, "You could just move in and help me run this chaos. I could use someone like you." It was meant to be a joke, just something to make her laugh before she left. To his surprise, she did laugh, and for a brief second her expression softened into something warm. But then, she looked at him in that quiet, thoughtful way that made him feel like he had said something deeper than he meant to. After finishing her coffee, Ava looked around the bookstore again. She commented on its charm, how it felt real and full of life, compared to the polished stores in the city. Ethan told her about his dream to turn the back room into a reading space for children and maybe a small cafe area. Ava listened carefully, asking questions that made him realize she understood more than she let on. When she finally left, the door closed softly behind her, and the little bell above the door gave one last ring. Ethan stood there for a moment, holding the empty coffee cup, feeling strange. He told himself it was just another business conversation, but something about Ava Grant's calm confidence stayed with him long after she was gone. Later that night, after tucking Lily into bed and cleaning the kitchen, Ethan sat by the window, listening to the rain fall over the street. He thought about the way Ava had looked at the shelves filled with books, tried to remind himself that people like her did not belong in small towns like his. She lived in a world of suits, meetings, and glass buildings high above the ground. Still, he could not help but imagine what it would feel like if she did move in to help, just like he had joked. He laughed quietly to himself at how ridiculous that sounded. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. The streetlight cast a soft glow over the wet sidewalks. Marley curled up at his feet. Ethan leaned back in his chair and looked over at the framed photo of Lily and himself at the summer fair. Life might not be perfect, but it was theirs. He did not know then that his offhand joke had just started something that would soon change everything about their quiet little world. The next morning, the sky over Maple Ridge was bright and clear. The storm had passed, leaving small puddles on the road and a smell of fresh rain in the air. Ethan woke early because Lily was already knocking on his bedroom door asking for pancakes. He smiled at how full of energy she always was even before the sun was fully up. After breakfast, he walked her to school and then went back home to get ready for another long day at the bookstore. He was still in his pajamas when he heard the sound of tires on gravel outside his house, Marley barked and ran to the window.
Ow.
Ethan frowned because he was not expecting anyone. When he opened the door, his mouth almost dropped open. Standing on the porch was Ava Grant. She was dressed neatly, but not like the day before. She had traded her city heels for simple shoes and carried a small black bag along with a folded laptop under her arm. Ethan blinked as he tried to understand why she was there. Ava smiled gently like she had arrived exactly where she was supposed to be. She told him that after thinking about what he had said the day before, she decided his joke had a point. She explained that her company was about to finalize a big merger and she needed a quiet space outside the city to work for a few weeks. His place, she said, seemed peaceful. She thought she could help him organize his bookstore in return. Ethan laughed nervously because he did not know what else to do. He tried to remind her that the offer had been a joke, but she only raised an eyebrow and said that she took initiative seriously. Before he could find the right words to stop her, she was already stepping inside, placing her bag next to the door and looking around with quiet approval. Marley wagged his tail and Lily's drawings on the fridge caught Ava's eye. She said it felt homey. Ethan scratched the back of his neck, wondering if he had somehow just agreed to let a CEO move into his small house. She asked him about the spare room, and when he pointed it out, she carried her things inside as if she had done it 100 times before. Ethan stood by the doorway watching her move. She looked completely at ease, like she belonged there. By the afternoon, Ava had set up her laptop on the kitchen table and was typing emails while sipping the coffee Ethan made for her. When Lily came home from school, she was surprised to see another person sitting there. Ava greeted her kindly, and soon Lily was asking endless questions about what a CEO did. Ava explained in simple words and even told her about the big buildings and bustling city life. Lily's eyes grew wide with interest. That evening was unlike any other night Ethan remembered. Usually he cooked alone and ate with Lily while helping her with homework. Now Ava joined them. She offered to help chop vegetables, but Ethan noticed she was more used to documents than kitchen knives. When she cut a carrot unevenly and laughed at herself, Ethan felt the stiffness between them ease a little. He found himself laughing too. After dinner, they all stepped outside for a walk. The air was cool, and the sunlight faded behind the trees. The streets glowed softly under the street lamps. Ava kept looking around, taking in the peaceful quiet of the town. She told Ethan it was strange how the silence here was comforting instead of lonely. He agreed and admitted that he could not imagine living anywhere else. When they returned home, Lily yawned and went to bed while Ava sat by the window with her laptop again. Ethan made tea and joined her. He talked a little more about books and business until the house grew quiet. Ava told him how different her life had been for years. Everything she did was surrounded by meetings, travel, and digital numbers on screens. She said that, in the city, everything moved so fast that people forgot to breathe. Ethan listened carefully, watching the way her voice softened when she spoke about slowing down. As the night grew later, he realized the situation no longer felt strange, felt natural, like she had always been there. He wondered if she might really stay for those few weeks, or if she would decide to return to her Hirie's office once the weekend ended. He told himself that it did not matter because, whatever this was, it was temporary. Yet when he went to bed that night, he found himself smiling at the thought of waking up and seeing her in his kitchen again. The next morning, sunlight filled the house. Ethan heard movement in the kitchen and found Ava already pouring cereal for Lily, who was chatting happily about school projects. The sight made him stop in his tracks. It looked like a family scene he had not seen in years. For the first time in a long while, the house did not feel half empty. It felt complete in a quiet, unexpected way. Ethan woke up early the next morning and heard laughter from the kitchen. It was a warm sound that filled the small house with life. When he walked in, he found Ava standing by the stove, wearing one of Lily's pink aprons that barely fit her. She was trying to flip pancakes while Lily sat at the table, clapping her hands and cheering every time one landed safely on the plate. Ethan smiled quietly. It was a sight he'd never expected to see in his home. Ava turned and greeted him like she had been living there for years. She looked different from the woman he met in the bookstore. Her hair was down, her sleeves rolled up, and there was no hint of the city boss tone in her voice. She laughed easily when Marley jumped up for crumbs. Ethan joined them, took over the spatula, and began to cook beside her. The kitchen smelled of butter and coffee. For a small moment, it felt like they were something close to a family. After breakfast, Ava insisted on going to the bookstore to help him with the shelves he had been meaning to rearrange. At first, Ethan tried to refuse, but she was firm. She said she needed a break from reading reports and staring at screens. When they arrived at Page Turner's, she rolled up her sleeves and began sorting books by authors while Ethan carried boxes from the back room. Customers who walked in gave curious glances at the woman who looked nothing like anyone who usually worked there. Some recognized her from business magazines and whispered in surprise. Ava pretended not to notice and smiled while helping an elderly woman find a novel. Ethan watched how naturally she handled herself. Even though her world had always been filled with numbers and deadlines, she fit into the bookshop rhythm faster than he expected. When lunch came around, they ate sandwiches by the front counter. Ava asked Ethan about his late wife, his years raising Lily alone, why he chose to run a bookstore instead of doing something else. Ethan answered honestly, though part of him was shy to share too much. He told her that books helped him heal after the loss, and that he wanted to give Lily a world where stories taught her about hope. Ava listened closely with a soft expression on her face. She told him that lately she had forgotten what hope even felt like, because her life only revolved around targets and achievements. It was the first time she seemed unsure of herself. Ethan said that maybe what she needed was to remember the small moments that mattered. That afternoon, Lily burst into the store after school carrying a drawing she made. It showed Ethan, Lily, and Ava standing in front of the bookstore, with Marley beside them. She proudly said it was their new team picture. Ava smiled and thanked her. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him that he could not explain. Over the next few days, Ava slowly brought changes to the bookstore. She helped him create a system for keeping records, cleaned the display windows, and even painted a corner where children could sit and read. Ethan found himself looking forward to her ideas. The shop began to look brighter and more organized. Customers noticed too. They stayed longer and bought more books because of how comfortable the place felt now. One evening, after Lily went to bed, Ethan and Ava sat on the porch drinking tea. The sound of crickets filled the night air. Ava looked thoughtful. She said she did not expect to enjoy Maple Ridge this much. She talked about how peaceful it was compared to the city, and how she had started waking up excited to come to the bookstore. Ethan listened with a quiet happiness, but at the same time he worried that she would soon leave, once her work called her back. They sat together without speaking for a long time, while the moon lit the street. Ethan wanted to tell her something, but the words stayed unspoken. He noticed how she looked at the stars with the same wonder that Lily did. It made him realize that maybe behind her business strength, there was a heart just as human as his own. The days turned into weeks. Ava was now part of every routine. She took Lily to school when Ethan was busy, helped organize weekend reading clubs, and even attended a small-town fair with them. At the fair, she laughed at the cotton candy spinning machine and joined Lily on the carousel. Ethan could not stop watching her. It was as if the life she had missed was finally catching up with her. That night, after returning home from the fair, Ethan stood by the window and looked at the light from Ava's room down the hall. I thought about how much had changed in such a short time. His home no longer felt quiet or lonely. It was full of motion, laughter, and a kind of warmth that reached every corner. He knew deep down that this calm could not last forever, but for now, he let himself enjoy the feeling. Ava was here, Lily was happy, and somehow everything that once felt broken was starting to mend in gentle, unexpected ways. One evening, the sky turned dark earlier than usual. The wind picked up fast and carried leaves down the street. Ethan was in the bookstore with Ava and Lily when the lights began to flicker. He checked his phone and saw a message about a heavy storm heading toward Maple Ridge. The town was used to short rain. But this looked serious. Ethan hurried to put books on higher shelves while Ava helped close the windows. Lily stayed near Marley, hugging him tightly as thunder rolled across the sky. Within minutes, the rain hit hard. It drummed on the roof, louder and louder, until they could barely hear each other speak. Water began to slide under the door. Ethan sighed and grabbed towels to block the entrance. Ava joined him without a word, and together they worked to keep the water out. Her business clothes were soaked, but she did not care. She was laughing as she tried to hold the towels in place, and Ethan could not help but laugh too. Something about the way she faced every problem made him forget about everything else. When the storm grew stronger, they decided to close the shop early. They ran to the truck through the downpour, carrying the last boxes they could save. By the time they reached home, they were dripping wet. Lily was half asleep in the back seat, clutching Marley's leash. Inside the house, Ava quickly found dry blankets while Ethan made sure the windows were sealed. Lightning flashed again and again outside, but soon the three of them settled together near the living room light. As the rain continued, they shared mugs of hot cocoa. Ava looked tired but peaceful. She asked Ethan why he had never thought of expanding his store. Ethan smiled and said he was happy with his small space and the customers he knew by name. Ava looked impressed by his simple answer. She said that every deal she ever made had been about growth and profit, but maybe success could also mean peace. He told her that peace had become his only goal after losing his wife. Ava's expression turned soft and thoughtful. After a while, the power went out completely. Only the small battery lamp glowed in the corner. Lily was sleeping now, her head on Ava's lap. Ava brushed the little girl's hair back gently, her usual confidence replaced by a calm tenderness. Ethan watched her and felt something shift inside him, something he had not felt in years. The storm outside no longer scared him. It sounded almost like a song on the roof. When the rain stopped near dawn, Ethan stepped outside to check the damage. The street was covered with fallen branches and puddles. The bookstore sign hung loose. It broke his heart to see watermarks across the front door. Ava joined him wearing one of his old jackets. She said they could fix it together. He looked at her and saw no hesitation in her face. For someone who lived in offices full of assistants, she seemed proud to stand beside him in the mud. They spent the morning cleaning what they could. Neighbors came to help, and by noon part of the bookstore was dry again. Ava rolled paint on the lower shelves while Ethan repaired the front frame. They worked side by side until their clothes were smudged with paint and dust. Lily proudly handed out cups of lemonade to everyone helping. It was hard work, but the laughter and simple teamwork made it almost fun. When evening came, Ava and Ethan sat on the front steps watching the sunset after the storm. The clouds had gone, leaving the sky wide and golden. They were quiet for a while until Ava finally spoke. She said that she had not felt so alive in years. For the first time, she did something not for her company or her investors, but for real people. Ethan nodded and told her that she belonged here more than she realized. Her eyes met his, and there was a long silence filled with understanding neither of them dared to name. That night, as Lily slept soundly, Ava stood in her doorway and thanked Ethan for letting her stay. She said he reminded her that life was more than contracts and buildings. He replied that she had reminded him that change was not always something to fear. When she smiled, it was no longer the polite smile of a CEO, but the gentle smile of someone who finally felt at home. The next few days passed quickly. Town slowly recovered, and the bookstore reopened better than before. People came in to thank Ava for her help. She laughed and said she had simply done her part. Ethan watched her talk to the customers, completely at ease. He wondered how a woman who belonged to the fast city world could fit so perfectly into his quiet one. Something had started between them, soft but strong. Neither of them spoke about it, yet both could feel it in the way their eyes met, or in the easy silence they shared. The storm had taken away the peace of one night, but had given them something else, something that might last far beyond the season. Weeks passed after the storm, and the air in Maple Ridge began to carry the scent of early spring. The bookstore looked brighter than ever, and life seemed calmer than it had in a long time. Ethan found himself whistling while setting out the morning display. Ava was working at the counter typing on her laptop. Lily sat beside her drawing new posters for the children's reading corner. The bell above the door rang as a few customers entered, greeting them by name. It felt like a small family business again, only warmer and livelier. In those weeks, the three of them had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Each morning, Ava would make coffee while Ethan packed Lily's lunch. They walked her to school together and joked with her on the way. Later, while Ethan handled the main counter, Ava dealt with suppliers or organized the shelves. She had learned everyone's preference, from the teacher who loved romance books to the old mechanic who only read history. Ethan often caught himself looking at her and thinking how strange it was that he had once believed she did not belong in a small town. She fit perfectly. But deep inside, both Ethan and Ava knew a change was coming. Ava's company was waiting for her to return to the city. Her main office had called twice already asking about her timeline. Each time she said she would come soon, but the word soon kept losing its meaning. She found excuses to stay longer, convincing herself she had more work to finish at the bookstore. Ethan noticed but said nothing. He did not want her to feel guilty for staying, yet he also feared the day she would pack her bags. One Thursday morning, Ava received an envelope from her company driver. It contained her final contract documents for the merger she had left unfinished. She read them quietly and then slipped the papers into her bag. Ethan saw the small flicker of sadness in her eyes. Later, when Lily went to bed, they sat together on the porch with mugs of tea. Crickets sang softly in the yard, and the air smelled of rain on grass. Ava spoke first. She told Ethan that her work in the city was waiting and that she could not avoid it forever. He nodded slowly, trying not to show the disappointment on his face. She said that she had never planned to stay this long, but Maple Ridge had given her something she did not even know she needed. She looked at him and said that while running a company taught her how to build an empire, being there with him and Lily had taught her what it meant to build a life. Ethan smiled faintly and said that some things were worth more than any company's success. Ava nodded, but her voice trembled a little when she said she would leave at the end of the week. The next few days passed quietly. Ava helped Lily finish a school project and made sure the bookstore files were neatly updated. On her last evening in town, there was a small gathering at the shop where neighbors thanked her for all she had done. Flowers filled the front counter and music played from a small speaker. Ethan tried to enjoy the celebration, but there was a heavy feeling behind every laugh. When the crowd left, the store grew silent again. Ava turned off the lights and looked around the space with affection. She said softly that she would miss it. The next morning the sun rose golden and warm. Ava's bag stood by the door. Lily hugged her tightly and asked if she really had to go. Ava promised she would visit. When she turned to Ethan, he did not know what to say. He simply took her hand and thanked her for everything. She held his hand a moment longer than expected and then stepped into the waiting car. As she left, Ethan felt the quiet return, the kind that sank deep inside. Days turned into a week. Ethan kept busy at the bookstore, but every time the doorbell rang, he looked up expecting to see her. One morning, a thick envelope arrived by mail. Inside was a letter from Ava. She wrote that she had finished the merger, but could not stop thinking about Maple Ridge. She said she missed the bookstore smell, the laughter, the calm mornings, and the feeling of belonging she could never find in the city. At the end of the letter, she wrote one simple sentence. She said she was coming back for good. Ethan read the letter twice before a smile spread across his face. That afternoon, he and Lily baked a pie and cleaned the house. The next morning, a familiar car stopped on the driveway. Ava stepped out, dressed simply, no briefcase this time, no noise of the city following her. When Ethan opened the door, she said quietly that she wanted to move in again, this time for real. Ethan did not joke this time. He pulled her into a hug and said, "Welcome home." Lily joined them laughing, and Marley barked as if to agree. The house filled with light, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt complete peace. The woman who once ruled boardrooms was now part of the heart that made their small world whole. Their life together began, not with a plan or a promise, but with shared laughter and a quiet belief that love had finally found its place to stay.